Dr. Alan Hayes stared at his computer screen, eyes wide. The data readings from planet Viridian couldn't be right. He checked the numbers again, running his hand through his messy brown hair. "This can't be happening," he whispered. Alan's small office at the Planetary Research Institute was cluttered with coffee cups and stacks of research papers. The windows showed a cloudy afternoon, but he hadn't noticed the weather change. For 6 hours straight, he'd been analyzing the unusual radiation patterns from Viridian, a planet 17 light-years from Earth. As one of Earth's leading atmospheric physicists, Alan recognized the signs immediately. Viridian's atmospheric layers were collapsing. The planet was headed for catastrophe. He picked up his phone and dialed his colleague, Susan. "Susan, I need you to verify these readings," he said, forwarding the data. "If I'm right, Viridian has less than 6 months before total atmospheric collapse." While waiting for Susan's response, Alan stared at the 3D model of Viridian rotating on his screen. The planet looked similar to Earth, oceans of deep purple, land masses in rich greens and browns. Somewhere on that beautiful world, intelligent, life was in danger. His computer suddenly pinged with an incoming transmission. Alan frowned. This wasn't Susan's reply. This was coming from Viridian itself. The screen flickered and a face appeared. The being looked nearly human, with pale blue skin and silver-white hair. Female, Alan guessed, with striking purple eyes that seemed to shine with intelligence. "Greetings, Earth scientist," she said in perfect English. "I am Corella, Chief Atmospheric, researcher of Viridian. We have intercepted your research signals." Alan's mouth fell open. "You speak English?" "We have studied your transmissions for many years," Corella explained. "Your language was not difficult to learn." Her face showed obvious worry. "Your readings are correct, Dr. Hayes. Our planet is dying. Our atmosphere is breaking down at an accelerating rate." Alan leaned forward. "Your government must be working on solutions?" Corella's expression darkened. "The High Council refuses to acknowledge the danger. They claim my research is flawed." She paused, looking over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. "I have a daughter, Dr. Hayes. Her name is Lyra. She is 8 cycles old, similar to your Earth years. She suffers from a respiratory condition that grows worse as our air quality deteriorates." "I'm sorry," Alan said softly. As a widower who had lost his wife 3 years ago, he felt particular sympathy for the worried mother. "Our society is highly structured," Corella continued. "We follow ancient laws and traditions. The Council's word is final. But I cannot accept their dismissal of my findings when my daughter's life is at stake." "What can I do?" Alan asked. "We're 17 light-years apart. Your research suggests you understand atmospheric regeneration better than anyone on my world. We need your knowledge." Alan nodded slowly. "I've been developing theories on planetary atmospheric stabilization. They're still experimental, but—" A noise interrupted Corella. She looked alarmed. "I must go. Council members are conducting inspections. I will contact you again when safe." Her image flickered. "Please, Dr. Hayes. You may be our only hope." The transmission ended, leaving Alan staring at the empty screen. Susan walked into his office, waving a printout. "Alan, I checked your data. You're right about Viridian. We should alert NASA immediately." Alan stood up, his mind racing. "It's more complicated than that now, Susan." He pointed to his screen. "I just spoke with someone from Viridian. They need our help." Susan stared at him in disbelief. "You what?" "We need to call an emergency meeting," Alan said, gathering his papers. "A planet is dying, and we might be the only ones who can save it." Alan's presentation to NASA officials wasn't going well. 3 days had passed since his conversation with Corella, and he stood before a panel of skeptical faces in a sterile conference room. "Dr. Hayes, while your data on Viridian is compelling, we can't justify an intervention mission based on a single communication," said Dr. Patel, the lead administrator. "People are dying," Alan insisted. "An entire civilization could be lost." "Even if we wanted to help," said another official. "Our fastest ships would take decades to reach Viridian." Alan shook his head. "Not necessarily. I've been working with Dr. Gail Warren on modified propulsion theories that could... Theoretical physics isn't going to save aliens 17 light-years away, Dr. Patel interrupted. We need months of verification before we can even discuss intervention options. As the meeting ended, Alan walked out frustrated. In the hallway, he received another transmission alert from his tablet. Finding an empty office, he accepted the call. Corella's face appeared, looking more tired than before. Dr. Hayes, conditions are worsening faster than predicted. The Council finally ordered evacuation plans, but our limited space technology can only save a fraction of our population. The camera angle widened, and Alan saw a small girl sitting beside Corella. The child had the same blue skin, but with darker hair that fell in curls around her face. Her breathing seemed labored. "This is my daughter, Lyra," Corella said softly. Lyra looked up at the screen. "Are you the human scientist my mother talks about?" Alan smiled despite his worry. "Yes, I'm Alan. It's nice to meet you, Lyra." "Mother says you understand atmospheres. Can you fix ours?" The child's direct question hit Alan hard. "I'm trying to find a way," he answered honestly. Corella gently sent her daughter to another room before turning back to Alan. "The Council has given me permission to share our atmospheric data with you. Perhaps together we can find a solution." She transmitted files to his system. After reviewing the new information, Alan felt both hope and desperation. "Corella, I believe we could stabilize your atmosphere with specialized terraforming equipment. But my government isn't willing to move quickly enough." "Then we are lost," Corella said, her voice breaking slightly. Alan made a decision at that moment. "No, you're not. NASA won't help immediately, but I have other options." That evening, Alan called his friend Owen Mitchell, a wealthy tech entrepreneur, who had privately funded space ventures. "You want to borrow my research vessel to save an alien planet?" Owen asked incredulously over dinner at his mansion. "It's the only ship with the experimental drive capable of making the journey in reasonable time," Alan explained. "With modifications, we could reach Viridian in months instead of decades." Owen studied Alan's face. "This isn't just about scientific curiosity. What's really driving this, Alan?" Alan thought about Lyra's simple question. "Since Beth died, I've buried myself in work. For the first time in 3 years, something matters more than my research. I can't just collect data while a civilization dies, especially not when a child asks me directly for help." Owen nodded slowly. "The board will fire me, but the ship is yours. What else do you need?" "A crew willing to risk everything, supplies, and modified atmospheric stabilizers." "I know a few people crazy enough to join you," Owen said with a slight smile. That night, Alan sent a message to Corella. "I'm coming to Viridian. Prepare your people. We'll bring the technology to save your atmosphere. It's unauthorized by my government, but I can't wait any longer. We'll reach you in approximately 4 months." Corella's reply came hours later. "My people don't deserve your sacrifice, but Lyra and I thank you with all our hearts." Alan began packing immediately. The most important journey of his life was about to begin. The ship hovered above Earth's orbit, gleaming like a silver needle against the black of space. Owen had renamed it Horizon for Alan's mission. Inside, Alan and his 5-person crew made final preparations. "Engine modifications complete," reported Gale, their propulsion specialist. "The experimental drive should hold for the jump sequence." Alan nodded, studying the navigation display. Their route would push the boundaries of known physics, using a theoretical shortcut through space that might, if they were very lucky, get them to Viridian in just over 3 months. "Final crew check," Alan announced, looking at each person who had volunteered for this potentially one-way journey. Besides Gale, there was Paul, their medical officer, Diane, the environmental systems expert, Keith, their engineer, and Maya, their communications specialist. "We're all still crazy enough to follow you," said Paul with a wry smile. "NASA's probably issuing warrants for our arrest right now." Alan smiled weakly. "Last chance to back out." No one moved. Right then, Alan said. Initiate launch sequence. The horizon shuddered as its engines powered up. Earth grew smaller beneath them until it was just another bright dot in the endless void. When they reached the calculated jump point, Gale activated the experimental drive. For a moment, everything seemed to stretch impossibly thin. Alan felt like his body was being pulled in all directions at once. Then, with a flash that left them, all momentarily blind, they jumped. The journey was difficult. 2 weeks in, the ship's life support systems faltered, forcing Keith to make repairs in the narrow maintenance tunnels while wearing a heavy suit. The experimental drive overheated frequently, requiring Gale to shut it down and recalibrate. During the quiet moments between crises, Alan studied Viridian's atmosphere, developing his stabilization plan. He also exchanged regular messages with Corella, though the communication delay grew as they traveled. On the 87th day of their journey, Maya called Alan to the bridge. "We're approaching Viridian, sir. Visual contact in 3 minutes." The crew gathered as the planet came into view on their main screen. It was beautiful and terrifying, blue-green oceans and rich forest lands, but with visible atmospheric disturbances swirling across its surface. Huge storms raged across entire continents, and through their instruments they detected dangerous levels of toxic gases rising from the planet's core. "It's worse than the data showed," Diane whispered. Alan checked the readings. "The atmospheric deterioration is accelerating. We have less time than we thought." They established orbit and prepared their landing craft. Only Alan, Diane, and Keith would descend to the surface for the first contact, while the others maintained the ship. As they entered Viridian's atmosphere, their small craft shook violently. The air was thick with particulates that scratched against their hull like thousands of tiny claws. "Atmospheric density 30% higher than Earth normal," reported Keith. "Breathable, but it'll be hard on our lungs." They landed on a flat plain near a large settlement. Through the viewports, they could see a gathering of Viridians waiting for them. "Remember," Alan said as they prepared to exit, "we don't know all their customs. Follow my lead." The door opened with a hiss, and Alan stepped onto alien soil. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making his first steps awkward. The air smelled of cinnamon and copper. A group of Viridians approached. Their blue skin seemed to shimmer in the strange light of their sun. At the front stood Corella, immediately recognizable from their communications. Beside her was a small figure that must be Lyra, wearing what looked like a breathing mask. Behind them stood several stern-faced Viridians in elaborate robes, members of their council, Alan guessed. Corella stepped forward, placing her hand over her heart in what must be a formal greeting. "Dr. Hayes of Earth, welcome to Viridian. You honor us with your presence in our time of need." Alan mimicked her gesture. "Thank you for your welcome, Corella of Viridian. We've come to help however we can." The council members exchanged glances, clearly still skeptical of these strange visitors from another world. The Viridian council chamber was a vast room with high ceilings of polished green stone. Alan stood before 20 council members seated in a semicircle, explaining his atmospheric stabilization plan. Corella translated when technical terms confused the council. "The process requires 3 phases," Alan said. "First, we neutralize the toxic gases using these converters." He displayed a holographic image of the devices. "Then we strengthen the atmospheric layers with specialized particles. Finally, we seal the volcanic vents, releasing the worst pollutants." "How can we trust that these foreign machines won't make things worse?" asked Counselor Aerith, an older Viridian with deep blue skin and suspicious eyes. Corella stepped forward. "I've reviewed Dr. Hayes' technology. It's compatible with our atmosphere and poses no additional risks." "Says the scientist whose predictions have caused widespread panic," countered Aerith. Alan noticed Lyra sitting quietly in the corner of the room, her breathing mask making a soft hissing sound. The girl's condition had worsened in the week since their arrival. "With respect," Alan said firmly, "your sensors confirm what Corella warned you about months ago. We've lost valuable time debating while your planet dies." This silenced the council momentarily. The head counselor, Vane, finally spoke. Very well. You have permission to deploy your devices. Corella will coordinate with your team. Outside the chamber, Corella approached Alan. Thank you for defending my work. Your data was always correct, Alan replied. Now we need to work quickly. The first stabilizers must be placed at the northern polar region, where the deterioration is worst. Over the next 3 days, Alan's team worked with Viridian scientists to prepare the devices. The Horizon remained in orbit, sending down supplies as needed. In the Viridian science facility, Alan noticed how Corella kept Lyra close, the child watching their work with intelligent eyes despite her illness. My daughter has always been fascinated by science, Corella explained when she caught Alan watching them. Even now she insists on observing rather than resting. She reminds me of my younger self, Alan admitted, always wanting to understand how things work. On the 4th day they were ready. 20 atmospheric converters had been prepared, each needing precise placement around the planet. Alan, Corella, and a team of Viridian engineers took off in their largest aircraft. The conditions were worse than expected. As they approached the northern region, violent storms battered their craft. The sky had turned a sickly yellow-green, with lightning strikes that seemed to burn the very air. These readings are critical, Corella shouted over the noise of the storm. The upper atmosphere is breaking down faster than predicted. Alan checked the stabilizer equipment. We need to deploy now, even if the positioning isn't perfect. The team worked frantically, launching converter after converter into the raging storm. Each device activated with a blue pulse of energy, creating small pockets of stability in the chaos. 12 hours later, they had placed all 20 converters. Back at the Viridian science facility, they monitored the results. It's working, Diane said, pointing to the readings. Toxicity levels are dropping by 3% per hour. But their victory was short-lived. An alarm sounded from their monitoring equipment. There's a problem, Keith reported. The volcanic vents in the southern hemisphere are releasing more gases than anticipated. The converters can't keep up. Alan studied the data, his heart sinking. We need to place additional converters directly at the vent sources. That's suicide, said Paul. Those areas are showing temperature readings of over 500 degrees. Corella looked up from where she was tending to Lyra, whose breathing had become more labored despite the initial atmospheric improvements. If we don't try, everyone dies anyway, she said quietly. Alan nodded. I'll go. I designed these systems. I have the best chance of modifying them to work under these conditions. Not alone, Corella said, standing. I know the volcanic regions better than anyone. We go together. They looked at each other across the room, 2 scientists from different worlds united by a common purpose. And increasingly, something more. Leave at dawn, Alan decided, his eyes moving from Corella to Lyra. And we will succeed, we have to. The southern volcanic region of Viridian looked like a landscape from hell. Black rock stretched for miles, broken by geysers of toxic gas and rivers of molten material. Alan and Corella's small craft hovered above the worst vent, buffeted by hot updrafts. Temperature outside is 482 degrees, Corella reported, her blue fingers dancing across the controls. The craft's shields are holding, but we can't stay long. Alan checked the modified converter. He had spent all night reconfiguring it to withstand the extreme conditions. We need to get within 50 meters of the main vent. Any closer and the heat will melt the deployment mechanism. They maneuvered closer, the craft shuddering violently. Through the view screen, Alan could see the monstrous vent belching yellow-green gas into the already poisoned sky. In position, Corella announced, deploying in 3, 2, 1. The converter launched smoothly, descending toward the vent. Its outer shell glowed red-hot almost immediately, but the protective coatings held. Activation signal sent, Alan said, watching the readings. It's working. Gas conversion beginning at 17% efficiency, 23%, 31%. Corella smiled for the first time in days. We need to deploy the remaining 5 converters at the secondary vents. For the next 2 hours, they worked methodically, placing each device with precision despite the dangerous conditions. The final converter needed to be placed at the most active vent, a churning pit of molten rock that spewed fire and toxic gas hundreds of meters into the air. "I can't get a stable hover," Corella said as their craft lurched sideways. "The updrafts are too strong." Alan looked at the readings. "The converter has to go directly into the vent mouth to be effective." "That's impossible from the air," Corella replied. "We'd need to land and deploy manually." They exchanged looks, both knowing what that meant. "I'll do it," Alan said firmly. "The protective suit might give me 45 seconds. "You'll never make it back to the craft in time," Corella argued. Before they could debate further, their communication system crackled to life. The face of Diane appeared, looking worried. "Alan, we have a situation. Lyra's condition has deteriorated severely. The medical team says her respiratory system is failing. The atmospheric improvements haven't happened fast enough to help her." Corella's face drained of color. "My daughter. I need to go to her." "Take the craft back," Alan decided. "Immediately. I'll deploy the final converter and use the emergency pod to escape." "That's too dangerous," Corella protested. "Your daughter needs you. Go." Alan's voice left no room for argument. After Corella reluctantly departed, Alan suited up in the protective gear. The emergency pod, little more than a heat-resistant shell with thrusters, was his only escape option. He landed the craft as close to the vent as possible, the ground beneath him hot enough to melt the landing struts. With the converter in his arms, he stepped out onto the scorching surface. The heat hit him like a physical wall. Warning lights immediately flashed inside his helmet. 38 seconds of protection remaining. Alan ran toward the vent, each step burning through his suit's protection. The converter grew heavier as his strength waned in the toxic atmosphere. 23 seconds left. He reached the vent's edge, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. Carefully, he positioned the converter, activating the deployment sequence. 15 seconds. As he turned to run back, the ground gave way. Alan fell, sliding toward the molten center. He grabbed desperately at an outcropping, halting his descent just meters from certain death. 9 seconds. Using his last strength, he pulled himself up and staggered toward the emergency pod. 3 seconds. The protective suit began to fail as he tumbled into the pod, slamming the hatch closed. His consciousness faded as the pod's automated systems activated, launching him away from the deadly vent. In the Viridian medical facility, Corella held Lyra's hand as the child struggled to breathe. Suddenly, the monitors showed improvement. The atmosphere was clearing rapidly. "The final converter is working," a technician reported. "Dr. Hayes did it." "But where is he?" Corella asked, tears in her eyes. The answer came minutes later when a battered emergency pod crashed outside the facility. Inside, they found Alan unconscious, his body covered in burns, but alive. As Viridian doctors worked to save him, Lyra's breathing steadied for the first time in months. Alan woke to unfamiliar sounds and strange blue light. His body felt heavy and his skin burned with pain. Slowly, his vision cleared enough to see he was in some kind of medical facility. Clear tubes ran from his arms to machines with symbols he couldn't read. "He's awake," said a voice. Corella's face appeared above him, her silver-white hair falling forward as she leaned closer. "Alan, can you hear me? You've been unconscious for 3 days." "Lyra?" he managed to ask, his voice rough. Corella smiled. "She's much better. The atmospheric converters are working perfectly. The toxicity levels have dropped by 78% already." Alan tried to sit up but couldn't. "My crew? All safe. They've been taking shifts sitting with you." She placed a cool hand on his forehead. "The doctors say you should recover fully, though there may be some scarring." The door opened and Lyra entered the room. The child no longer wore a breathing mask, and her blue skin had a healthier glow. She approached the bed cautiously. "Hello?" she said softly. "Mother says you got hurt fixing our air." Alan managed to smile. "Worth it to see you breathing better." Lyra nodded seriously. "I made you something." She handed him a small object, A carved stone pendant in the shape of what appeared to be a Viridian symbol. It means second life, Corella explained. It's given to those who survive near-death experiences. Over the next week, Alan regained his strength. His crew visited regularly, bringing updates on the atmospheric restoration progress. By the 10th day, he could walk around the medical facility with assistance. On the 12th day, the Viridian Council requested his presence. Still weak, Alan was transported to the council chamber in a hover chair. Corella and Lyra accompanied him. The chamber was packed with Viridians, all standing respectfully as he entered. Head Counselor Vane approached with a ceremonial robe. Dr. Alan Hayes of Earth, Viridian owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You risked your life to save our world when our own leaders failed to act. He looked pointedly at the other council members who lowered their eyes in shame. Your actions have saved millions of lives, Vane continued. Our atmosphere is healing, our people are no longer dying. For this we name you Viridian Friend, the highest honor we can bestow upon a non-Viridian. The assembly applauded as Vane placed the robe around Alan's shoulders. Counselor Aerith, who had been most skeptical, stepped forward. I was wrong to doubt, he admitted, both about our crisis and about trusting outsiders. Please accept my personal gratitude. Alan nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. Anyone would have done the same. No, Corella said firmly. They wouldn't have. After the ceremony, Alan met with his crew to discuss their return to Earth. The horizon was fully repaired and ready for the journey home. NASA's been sending messages daily, Maya reported. They're furious we took the ship, but the international community is calling us heroes. The images we sent of Viridian have changed everything. First contact with an alien civilization tends to overshadow stolen spaceships. Alan looked out the window at the Viridian city. The sky above it was clearing, showing hints of a beautiful turquoise blue. We should leave within the week, he said. The drive needs optimal conditions for the return jump. Later that evening, as Alan packed his few belongings in his guest quarters, Corella visited alone. We need to discuss something important, she said, her expression serious. When you saved Lyra's life, you activated one of our most ancient laws. Alan looked up, puzzled. What law? The law of life debt. It states that one who saves a Viridian life claims responsibility for that life. She hesitated. By saving Lyra, you have, in our legal tradition, claimed responsibility for her, and as her mother, for me as well. I don't understand, Alan said. Corella sat beside him. In simple terms, by our oldest and most sacred laws, you have claimed us as your family. To reject this claim would bring terrible dishonor to Lyra and me. We would become outcasts. You're saying that because I saved Lyra, I'm now responsible for both of you? Forever? Yes, Corella replied softly. By our law, you must take us both with you when you leave. Alan stared at her, trying to process this cultural complication he never saw coming. Alan paced in his quarters, his mind racing. Outside the window, Viridian's newly stabilized atmosphere glowed with a beautiful sunset, but he barely noticed. This can't be right, he said to Paul, who sat listening. They expect me to take Corella and Lyra back to Earth because of some ancient law? Paul shrugged. Different planet, different rules. From what you've told me, family bonds are sacred here. Saving a life creates a permanent connection. But I can't just adopt them. Why not? Paul asked simply. Alan stopped pacing. What? I've seen how you look at them, Alan. Especially Corella. And Lyra adores you. Alan sank into a chair. That's not the point. Earth isn't ready for aliens living openly among humans. And what about their lives here? Corella is respected in her field. Lyra has friends, family. A soft knock interrupted them. Counselor Vane entered, his formal robes exchanged for simpler clothing. Dr. Hayes, may we speak privately? After Paul left, Vane sat across from Alan. Corella has informed me of your dilemma regarding the life debt law. It puts me in an impossible position, Alan said. Vane nodded. Our ancient laws were not written with interplanetary relationships in mind. but they cannot be ignored. He leaned forward. You should know that Corella tried to have the council make an exception. She does not wish to force this obligation upon you. She did? Alan was surprised. Yes. She argued that Earth customs should take precedence since you are returning there. But the council refused. The law of life debt has never been set aside in our history. Alan rubbed his temples. What happens if I leave them behind? Fane's expression darkened. Corella would lose her position. Lyra would be denied education. They would become untethered, without social standing or protection. In our society, this is devastating. That's cruel punishment for something they had no control over. It is our way, Vane replied simply. The law exists to ensure those who save lives recognize the responsibility that comes with such power. After Vane left, Alan contacted Earth. The communication delay was minimal, thanks to Viridian technology. Director Patel's face appeared on screen, her expression stern. Dr. Hayes, while your unauthorized mission has yielded remarkable first contact results, there will be consequences when you return. That's why I'm calling, Alan replied. I need clearance to bring 2 Viridians back with me. Patel looked shocked. Absolutely not. We have no protocols for alien visitors. These aren't visitors, they're... Alan hesitated. They're my responsibility now. He explained the life debt law and its implications. Patel frowned. This isn't our problem. Hayes, leave them behind. I can't do that. Then stay there yourself, she snapped. The crew returns with the ship. The connection ended abruptly. That evening, Alan found Lyra in the garden outside their quarters. She was watching insects similar to butterflies hovering around blue flowers. Are Earth gardens like this? She asked as he sat beside her. Some are. We have many different kinds. He watched her for a moment. Lyra, do you understand what your mother explained to me about the life debt? The child nodded. You saved me, so we're your family now. How do you feel about that? About possibly leaving Viridian? Lyra touched one of the flowers gently. I used to dream about the stars when I was sick. Mother would tell me stories about other worlds. She looked up at him. Is Earth beautiful? It is, Alan replied. But Viridian is your home. Home is with your family, Lyra said with simple wisdom. That's what Mother always says. Later, Alan found Corella in the science facility, reviewing atmospheric data. We need to talk, he said. She turned to face him. I'm sorry about this situation. Alan, I tried to convince the council. I know, Vane told me. He took a deep breath. I've been thinking about solutions. What if I stayed here instead? Corella looked surprised. You would abandon your world? It might be easier than you abandoning yours. She stepped closer. That's not the only option. The law requires that we remain your responsibility, but it doesn't specify where or how. What do you mean? Perhaps we could divide our time between worlds, create a new kind of bond that honors both cultures. Alan considered this. A cultural exchange program. You and Lyra spend time on Earth, but return regularly to Viridian. Exactly, Corella said, hope in her voice. And you would visit us here. We could bridge our worlds in ways never before possible. For the first time since learning of the life debt, Alan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. And something else. A realization that he didn't want to say goodbye to Corella and Lyra permanently. I think, he said slowly, that might be the perfect solution. The Viridian Council chamber was filled to capacity. Hundreds of blue-skinned citizens watched as Head Counselor Vane struck the ceremonial stone, bringing the emergency session to order. We gather today to consider an unprecedented modification to the law of life debt, Vane announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Alan stood beside Corella and Lyra, all 3 wearing formal Viridian robes. His crew members sat in the front row, supportive but clearly anxious about further delays to their departure. Dr. Alan Hayes of Earth has proposed an alternative fulfillment of the life debt, Vane continued. Rather than permanent relocation of the bonded family, He suggests a shared existence between worlds, a bridge between Viridian and Earth cultures. Counselor Aerith rose from his seat. This is highly irregular. The law of life debt has remained unchanged for 12,000 cycles. So has our isolation from other worlds, countered another counselor. Perhaps it is time for our laws to evolve. The debate continued for hours. Some counselors argued for tradition, while others embraced the possibility of change. Throughout it all, Alan noticed Lyra sitting patiently, her small hand holding her mother's. Finally, Vane called for silence. Dr. Hayes, please address the council directly. Alan stepped forward, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. When I came to your world, I knew only that you needed help. I never expected to find a connection here that would change my life. He glanced at Corella and Lyra. On Earth, we believe that families can take many forms. Sometimes they're created by birth, sometimes by choice, and sometimes, he smiled, by saving someone from a volcano. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. I cannot abandon my world completely, just as Corella and Lyra should not be forced to abandon theirs. But perhaps we can create something new, a family that exists between worlds, strengthening the bond between Earth and Viridian. Vane nodded thoughtfully. Corella, do you support this proposal? With all my heart, she replied. It honors the spirit of our law while creating new possibilities for both our worlds. After a brief consultation, Vane struck the stone again. The Council has reached its decision. We hereby modify the law of life debt to permit interplanetary familial bonds, provided regular contact is maintained. Dr. Hayes will remain responsible for Corella and Lyra, but they may divide their time between worlds. Cheers erupted throughout the chamber. Lyra jumped up excitedly, hugging Alan's legs. 3 days later, the horizon was ready for departure. Alan had spent hours in communication with Earth officials, finally securing special permission for his Viridian family's visit. Director Patel had reluctantly agreed after international pressure mounted. The scientific community was eager to learn from Viridian knowledge. In the loading bay, Alan watched as Corella and Lyra said goodbye to their friends and family members. Both carried small bags containing personal treasures and gifts. Are you sure about this? Gale asked him quietly. It won't be easy for them on Earth. We'll face those challenges together, Alan replied. And in 6 months, I'll bring them back here for a visit. We'll make it work. The journey home was filled with preparation. Corella spent hours learning Earth customs, while Lyra mastered English grammar with remarkable speed. They marveled at pictures of Earth's diverse landscapes and asked endless questions about human society. As they approached Earth orbit, Alan brought Corella and Lyra to the observation deck. Below them, the blue-green planet grew larger. It's beautiful, Lyra whispered, pressing her face against the viewport. Different from Viridian, but beautiful in its own way, Corella agreed. Alan stood between them, a hand on each of their shoulders. Welcome to your second home. In the months that followed, their unusual family adjusted to life on Earth. There were challenges, cultural misunderstandings, occasional hostility from fearful humans, bureaucratic hurdles, but also joy and discovery. Corella's scientific knowledge accelerated Earth's environmental restoration projects, while Lyra thrived in her special educational program. 6 months later, as promised, they returned to Viridian for their first visit. Standing on a hillside overlooking the Viridian capital city, Alan watched the sunset with Corella beside him and Lyra running ahead, exploring. Do you regret it? Corella asked softly. Taking responsibility for us? Alan took her hand, their fingers intertwining, a gesture they had both grown comfortable with over the months. Not for a moment. Sometimes the best families are the ones we never expected to find. Above them, both Earth and Viridian were visible as evening stars in the twilight sky. 2 worlds connected by an ancient law, an act of courage, and a family that belonged to both.